Hey, what's up guys, Mendel here. So today we're gonna record some metal bass, so as always, let's dig right in. So let's talk about the very basics, the stuff you need to do before hitting that record button. So as you hopefully agree, the most important thing when recording something is the source. And obviously with recording bass guitar, metal bass guitar, or any bass guitar in general, it starts with the bass player. And I think especially in metal it's important to have a bass player with a good picking technique. A bass player who doesn't pick too hard so the note goes sharp and doesn't pick too soft so you lose all the transient and the attack of the bass. So besides the picking technique, it's also important to have a good muting technique. If the bass player doesn't mute on the right places, on a recording you can have like weird harmonic, artificial kind of things that you don't want to have in a nice clean bass metal recording. So for this video I asked my best friend Willem-Jan Keddeman. He's one of the most phenomenal bass players I personally know. And as you can see and later on here, he has a phenomenal picking tech right there in the pocket. It's not too hard so the notes go sharp, and it's not too soft that I lose all my attack and transient. Also, every time I tracked him, I noticed his muting is very solid, so it makes the recording very tight and clean. So when we wrote the riff for this video, we incorporated a lot of muting, so you can really hear that muting is really important in bass recording. So before we started tracking, we cleaned the bass, everything is nice cleaned out, and then one of the most important things in the whole wide world, use new bass strings. Again, please people, use new bass strings. When tracking for an album or even for an EP, I'd advise to use new bass strings every 3 to 4 songs, because after 4 songs, they really start to die out. So to recap that, have a good bass player. I forgot to say have a good quality bass, also pretty important. Have it nice cleaned up, intonated, the whole thing set up, and of course new bass strings, and then you can go into the recording step. Okay, so now let's talk about recording the bass itself. Now there are a million ways to record bass, but for this video, I just want to keep it really simple. So when I mix metal, I always want to have a clean bass DI at my disposal. For me, the bass DI is like a clean slate. I can reamp it, I can compress the DI, I can do anything with it. It's a must for me. So to keep it simple, you use a short cable. The shorter the cable, the less tone that's lost, and plug it straight into the high Z input. You can also use a DI block to split up things, but as I said before, I want to keep things simple for this video. So by plugging the bass straight into DI, that's where I have my clean DI signal. But for most bass players, just having the DI signal as their monitoring won't be the most inspiring thing they will ever hear in their life. I think there are very few metal bass players who just want to record with DI. So there are a lot of ways to solve this. In this situation, like I said, I plugged into the high Z input, right? So that signal I routed back into the Kemper, and then the Kemper output back into the interface, so I could record the DI and the Kemper, both of them simultaneously. That way I have my DI, my clean sleeve, the thing I want, and on the other hand, the bass player has a tone he's comfortable with. Which is very important, by the way. The bass player should have a tone that he's comfortable playing with. Now last but not least, the bass player is obviously not only hearing his own bass tone, he's also hearing the backing. So what should you put in the backing? I can tell you from experience that most bass players want to have it as simple as possible. When I talked about Willem about this, he told me that he want to have it as simple as possible, just drums and guitars. No leads, no solos, no vocals if those are recorded by any chance. Those are all distractions for the bass players, at least for most bass players. So keep it simple. Just the drums, just the guitars, perhaps even have the kick drum a bit louder, because like I said in my previous videos, the bass and the drums are the foundation of the whole mix. And I guess the thing I'm about to say is important in all genres, but the kick drum and the bass guitar should be like this, like best friends forever, locked and loaded, locked in. Not sure what this means, but locked in. So let's say you don't have external gear like a bass distortion pedal or a Kemper, etc. for the bass player to record with. You could use an amp sim, but make sure you turn the buffer size of your interface in the software all the way down. That way there's a minimum of latency. So when it comes down to the point of recording like everything in one take or something in multiple takes, in my opinion, like I say in most of my videos, there are no rules. I personally do not care if a bass player or a guitar player for that matter records everything per measure or everything per 4 measures or whatever, as long as it sounds good. That's the only thing I care about. So I don't care if a bass player does it in one take, which is cool and it saves time, I'll admit. But if a bass player want to do it in multiple parts, so be it, as long as the end result is epic. What I do most of the time, and Willem as well, is we use the loop recording function of Cubase. That way I can just hit record and it loops the section over and over and over again, and then we'll listen back to the best take and pick that one out. So that's a lot of talking, but it's necessary information. So let's see how well he plays. Let's track some bass. Alright, so I personally think that sounds pretty cool. So in the next video we're gonna dive into mixing metal bass guitar. So stay tuned for that one. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And also let me know what you want to see next time regarding Cubase and metal videos. So, my name is Mendel and see you next time.